So I was trying to see if I had any stuffed pigs to be a prop this morning for this video, and I'm like, well, I couldn't find any. I was like, do I have a stuffed Tepig for Pokemon? I'm like, no, I don't have any of the Unova starters, surprisingly enough, even though I actually kind of like all three of them. But I was trying to find something to be a pig prop or a spider prop, which is much less likely for me to have because I have arachnophobia, which is funny considering the movie I'm going to talk about today. So this is kind of going to be the first one in a sporadic series where I'm going to talk about different non-Disney, non-DreamWorks, non-anime animated movies. So generally these are going to be animated movies that come from a company that does not specifically just do animation. Like, Disney is, renowned for, its animation. Same thing with Pixar, same thing with DreamWorks. Same thing with, anime movies. I'll end up doing like another whole series where I do a bunch of other different anime movies and such, but not yet. I'm not even technically finished with the Studio Ghibli movies yet. I still have to do The Boy and the Heron. But I can't, the site where I get the pictures from is not giving me the pictures yet because they're not on the site yet. So I don't want to do the review until I can show as much of it as possible. So I'm waiting on that. But I decided that, well, this one can be a sporadic series that I do of different non-Disney animated movies. Now, later on, this will include stuff like the Anastasia and the Land Before Time movies, Balto, An American Tail, stuff like that will eventually end up in this series because while they are stuff that is technically can be in a series at times in regards to like the Land Before Time movies, I'm not going to review all of the Land Before Time movies, don't worry. That would take forever. And by the time I'd get finished with it, you'd probably be in a land after time. But my intention is to basically, eventually work my way through a bunch of these different non-Disney animated movies. And then DreamWorks eventually will have like its own series where I talk about a bunch of the DreamWorks movies. But not yet. So the first one up on the list is Charlotte's Web from 1973. And I know that this one is not exactly as, as widely known to a degree as like a lot of the other ones that are going to be on this list. But this movie actually has a special place in my heart because when I was growing up, for a while after my parents got divorced, my dad's parents lived in Lincoln. I mean, my grandpa at this point in time is still in Lincoln. My grandmother has sadly passed away, but they moved to Lincoln a couple of years before my parents got divorced. And after my parents got divorced, there kind of developed this kind of a thing where on Saturday evenings or Sunday evenings or something like that, where my dad and I would go and have dinner at my grandparents' house. And I'm, not even a teenager at this point in time. I am like less than 10 years old, probably, if that. And even before that, like my mom would sometimes, it would be all of us go to dinner before my parents got divorced. And such, and my parents or my dad would stay upstairs and talk to my grandparents, and I would go downstairs and watch on the my grandparents I don't think had cable at that point in time, but I would end up, they had a VCR and in the basement I would end up watching the VHS copy of this version of Charlotte's Web, of the 1973 version, and I would just sit there and I would love watching it. They also had an animated version of The Secret Garden that I really liked watching, and I still have not found that one anywhere, but I will eventually find it, I hope. But I just loved watching it, and I loved Charlotte and Wilbur and all and Templeton and all the animals and and Fern and everything. And like this quaint little farm life thing that's also about this pig trying to avoid being turned into bacon. And I just eventually decided that I really like the movie and everything. But I also like the idea of, and I've stated this before for the specific reason of this movie, is that if I ever have a daughter that I get to name, as in like I'm not just adopting her, or a stepdaughter or something, I intend to name her Charlotte because I've always loved that name because of this movie. And I guess I technically, it's like I find it hilarious that it's like, well, I have arachnophobia, but I want to name my child after a spider. It's like, okay then. Yeah, I see the irony in it. Trust me, I do. I'm not having a son and naming it after Aragog from Harry Potter. God no, that is still the one scene in all of Harry Potter I cannot watch is the forest scene with all the spiders. God no. No. Too realistic of a depiction, and even the 2006 or 8 version or whatever that they made of Charlotte's Web with Dakota Fanning and such. I think Julia Roberts played Charlotte in that, and I know that Oprah played like the goose that's in it. I don't remember who was any of the other roles, but those were the main ones. And I just I can watch the movie and I enjoy it, but the scenes with Charlotte as like a very anatomically correct spider still kind of creep me out. I'm like, I get it, but still, no. So actually going into this, this version of Charlotte's Web came out in 1973, and it is it is a Hanna-Barbera production of the 1952, children's book Charlotte's Web by E.B. White. I'm assuming that it was probably popular enough if they decided to make a movie out of it, an animated movie out of it, because at the time live action would have been very difficult for all of the talking animals and everything. Not that it couldn't have been done, but it would have been a lot more difficult. And there's actually a fairly decent cast in this movie that I'll go over later on. But going into the story, so the story of course starts at on a farm in at the beginning of spring with all of the new animals being born, baby geese, baby pigs, baby cows, baby horses, all this other stuff being born. And one of the piglets unfortunately is the runt of the litter, and the owner of the farm, John, is going to slaughter the piglet, the runt of the litter, because they don't always survive well, or they can be a problem for trying to deal with and everything. And I've grown up around some farm families. I've mentioned before that I have an aunt and uncle in the southern middle part of Nebraska who have a farm. They raise cows, and I don't know the whole rules for how they determine which cows they keep and which they don't keep. But, my cousins would help raise the cows, but there's like a different mentality that comes into this. But the farmer's daughter, Fern, is like, no, Papa, you can't kill the pig. It's not right. And she ends up, convincing him to let her take care of the pig. Well, so she's trying to convince him to not slaughter the piglet. And what happens is he's just like, okay, I'm going to turn this into a lesson, and gives her the baby, the little piglet, for her to raise, and her to take care of and everything. And she takes right to it, and she adores him. She adores the piglet. She names him Wilbur. And then, of course, we also meet her brother, who also has a proclivity for trying to, for animals, and he has somehow snuck a frog into the house, and it eventually just like gets out and causes a bunch of trouble at breakfast, landing on the butter and the pancakes and the syrup and just causing havoc. And then we just have like this nice little sequence where we have Fern taking care of Wilbur and everything, and bathing him, feeding him, running around and playing with him, all this other stuff. And we have this cute little musical sequence. This is an animated movie. It is a musical animated movie, and like the slight style of Disney to a degree. Even though it's not Disney, it's Hanna-Barbera, which, I mean, Hanna-Barbera had its proclivity for having occasionally having musicals in some of their things. I mean, they did a lot. I'm sure there's musical things of the Flintstones. Actually, I know there are musical things of the Flintstones. And even Scooby-Doo has some musical elements to it. Not so much Thundercats, but you get the idea. And so Fern is raising Wilbur, and of course we end up meeting this boy in town who Fern, I guess, kind of likes him, but his mother is very strict and, doesn't like the thought of her son doing anything that's not like productive and, high class type of a thing. And then of course eventually it's Fern's father ends up deciding that, okay, no, the pig's big enough now, the pig can sleep outside. Which just makes Fern sad, but she sets Wilbur to sleep outside. And that doesn't go well that first night because there's a thunderstorm and Wilbur gets scared and tries to get into the house, which makes the farmer and Fern's parents think that there's a burglar trying to get in. It's like, first of all, this burglar is very bad. If they can't use the sound of the thunder to try to hide the fact that they're trying to sneak into a house at night during a thunderstorm, which just causes problems because Wilbur gets back into the house, which scares the farmer and makes him fall over, and then he hides, and then he just gets sent back outside by the mom, and such. And eventually it gets to about 6 weeks later, and Wilbur is a spring pig, and in the farmer's mind, in John's mind, Wilbur is ready to be sold, saying that his siblings have already been sold, and this just makes Fern very, very sad, excuse me. And he's like, well, I'm going to sell him to your uncle Homer Zuckerman down the road. And she's just like, no, and she's so sad and everything. But Wilbur gets sent off down the road. I mean, like, okay, well, he's not getting sent too far, but she's developed the emotional connection to him that she doesn't want him to be killed, which is fair in this regard. And, so then we have it that, Wilbur gets to the farm. And that night there's this goose that lives on the farm who's, working on hatching her eggs. And she eventually coaxes him into realizing that he can talk. And then we have this nice little song that's like Wilbur dancing around his, pig pen and up on top of the fence and everything like that. And I can talk, blah, 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 blah. Going off about that. And, it's very annoying to the other animals in the pen, except for the goose. And then eventually it's, after that, and it's, he's, very delayed, he's delayed by the new ability. And then he's just like, goes back to being sad. And she's like, what's wrong? And he's like, I want a friend, because he misses Fern. And, so we get, some other bits that we get to see. We get to meet some of the other animals in the barnyard. There is Templeton, who is this rat that lives under Wilbur's food trough, and will eat food from the trough and everything like that since he's a rat. And very much in it for me. We have the goose who is sitting on her egg. She never really gets a name in this. We also meet these sheep, and we have it that Wilbur tries to befriend one of the baby sheep, and the sheep's father is just like, no, we do not play with pigs. It's simply a matter of time until the pigs are turned into smoked bacon and ham. And that just kind of sets Wilbur off, which is understandable, very understandable. But it's also showing this, trying to depict, this hierarchy in the farm where it's like, the sheep are like, well, we give Zuckerman wool, and we are a renewable resource to a degree. So it's worth putting, we're worth keeping around because of our fur and fleece and everything like that. You, on the other hand, are good for, more specific matters that really only involve you reaching a certain size type of a thing. As delicately put it. And that just makes Wilbur very, very sad. But he's still, he's sad and he's lonely and he misses Fern and he just wants a friend. Because, like, as nice to him as the goose is, she can't really get up and go and start roaming, or, playing with him and everything like that. We also meet Farmer Zuckerman and Lurvy and Mrs. Zuckerman. Lurvy's like the farmhand and everything like that. So we get to meet them. And they all seem nice. I mean, and Fern, she can come and visit and everything. And since it is her uncle's farm. But then, one night Wilbur is still just sad, and then he hears this, voice telling him, to keep his chin up. And he's talking to this disembodied voice in his pig pen. And he's just like, okay, who are you? And, she's like, just, keep your chin up and wait until morning and I'll reveal myself. And he's like, okay. And then the next morning, we have it that he is, that the voice reveals herself to be Charlotte. Charlotte A. Cavatica. I believe Cavatica is supposed to be a breed of spider. At least that's what it looked like when I looked it up. I didn't spend very long looking at the distinctive explanation of a spider, of what type of spider it was, because the arachnophobia kicks in and it doesn't help, but I'm just like, I can't do it. I'm sorry. It's like, I don't like spiders. But I also I love this movie, and it's just like, there's weird pairing here. I'm like, I'm aware of the irony here. Trust me. Very much aware of the irony. And, so Charlotte introduces herself, and she sings the song Chin Up to try to help cheer Wilbur up. And she's like, I like you and everything like that. You're my friend and everything. And eventually, Wilbur is trying to watch her as she's, making her web and everything. And he makes a comment of well, can I try to spin a web? And she's like, well, you can try. And this eventually ends up resulting in Templeton tying a string to Wilbur's tail, tying the other end of the string to one of the rafters on the pig pen, and then Wilbur trying to jump and try to spin a web. And it basically just resulted in hanging from the the support beam in the barn by his tail on the string, and then he falls. So it's yeah, that didn't go very well. That didn't go very well at all. So we have that, and we just have these nice little bits here where we have Charlotte and Wilbur talking, and he's like, well, I think you're beautiful. And she goes well, I am pretty. Nearly all spiders are good looking. I'm not as flashy as some, but I'll do. So it's, Charlotte is very prim and proper, but she's also very smart. And she's not afraid to try to play with Wilbur a little bit at times. She'll come down and talk to him and everything like that. And he finds her fascinating. Barring the whole thing of, she'll trap bugs in her web and then, eat them, suck their blood out. And he's just like, oh boy, no. Very woozy about that. So they have that whole fun bit there. With that whole setup of their relationship. And she's like, well, I have to survive. Unlike you, I don't have food brought to me in a trough. So this is what I have to do. Also, if spiders didn't exist, or if we didn't eat bugs like this, then the whole world would be overrun with bugs, which is true. That is true. And while I don't have a personal huge amount of affection for spiders, I understand that they have the right to exist. I just don't want them existing super near me in my house. Outside my house in certain areas is fine. But yeah, not the biggest fan of that. And eventually we have it that, Charlotte kind of makes the promise to Wilbur that, I'm going to try to do what I can to try to save your life. And so Wilbur is very happy about that. And then we have it that, all the little goslings hatch from the goose, that the goose has been sitting on from her eggs, all hatch. And there's one little one whose name is Jeffrey, who's kind of like the little runt of the litter, but like he gets, him and Wilbur become very, very fast friends, and his mom's fine with it. And at this point in time, some of the other barnyard animals seem to have warmed up to Wilbur a little bit. And like we have like, this nice song here that's like, we've got a lot in common, which is basically results in like the whole animal part, all the animals on the farm singing. And Fern happens to be there for this because she showed up and is like there to, I guess, see Wilbur. And she's just like watching as all of this is happening. And it's like, okay, the scene would play the exact same even if Fern wasn't here. But she's here, and it's implied that, considering that she mentions it later to her parents, she can understand all of the animals talking and singing and synchronized dancing and everything. And I'm just like, okay, I get that, but why? And as I've stated before, if I had the ability to talk to animals, I would probably be much more willing to try to become a vegetarian. But it's like, okay, if you want to try to save the fact that your pig is going to get eaten, revealed to the world that it can talk. So it's like, I'm assuming this is supposed to play up of like, young girl who's innocent has ability to understand animals, and when she grows up she won't be able to understand them anymore. It's the whole Disney trope of like, oh yeah, the humans can understand the animals because they can talk, so it's fine. It's like talking animal companion, so that's what Fern can do. Yeah. But one of the eggs from the goose doesn't hatch. It's a dud egg, and Templeton takes it and has it like buried in his little section underneath the trough. So we have all of that stuff going on, and then Charlotte eventually reveals that she has this plan that she's going to play a trick on Zuckerman. And Wilbur is just like, you're not going to hurt him, are you? And she's like, no. I'm simply going to play a little trick on him. And it's like, trust me, Wilbur, people are very gullible. They'll believe anything they see in print. Boy, how right you are, Charlotte. How right you are. So they have that. And, so what eventually happens is, well, there's this funny little scene where Charlotte is trying to figure out what she wants to try to do exactly. She has an idea, but she's just trying to figure out how to, like, do the first part of it, which is, writing the words in the web. But we have this moment where Fern and her brother Avery come and visit the farm. And Avery tries to capture Charlotte, doesn't work, ends up actually cracking and smashing the rotten egg that Templeton had set aside, which just makes all of the bad smell show up, and him and Fern have to leave and everything. So there's that funny bit that happens. And then we have like this two-pronged song that happens where we have Deep in the Dark, which is just like this little lullaby that Charlotte sings to help Wilbur fall asleep. And then it goes into Charlotte's Web, which is actually the name of one of the songs. And during the sequence, we have this pretty little, sequence of, Charlotte, weaving her web and everything, because she's deciding what she's going to put in it. The next morning, Lurvy shows up, the farmhand shows up to deliver, Wilbur's food, delivers it, looks up, sees in the barn, some pig written in Charlotte's Web, and they're just like, oh my god, and he runs, he's just like screaming and having a panic attack, and like Zuckerman and his wife come out and they see this, and Zuckerman's like, oh my god, it's a sign, we have an amazing pig. And I love the fact that his wife, Mrs. Zuckerman, is just like, no, I think we just have a very unusual spider. So that's just kind of funny. She's on the nose. It's like, it's not the pig that's special, it's the spider that happened to be able to write and read and spell and spin a web that has the words some pig written in it. That's the miracle here. So this basically leads to huge amounts of like people coming in and seeing this, the some pig and everything like that, and pictures and everything like that in the newspaper and all of this other stuff going on, and and like that goes really great for a little while, then eventually kind of the miracle dies down. and they have, people move on. They're not that interested anymore. The miraculous spider web and everything like that. Okay, that's fine. And such. So Charlotte's like, okay, well, we got to figure out something else because the web kind of gets destroyed and everything. And so she has like this meeting where they have all of the different animals trying to suggest different words that could describe, Wilbur. And the goose comes up with terrific, terrific, terrific. And Charlotte is like, okay, we're going to shorten that down to one terrific and we have a deal. And we have this funny bit where, the goose is trying to spell terrific and it's like triples of every letter. So that's, like doubles of triples of letters. And Charlotte's like, I am not an acrobat. I can't spell that. And then the sheep is like, okay, this is how you actually spell it. And she's like, okay, thank you. And then there's also this funny moment because Templeton didn't want to come to the meeting, so Charlotte messes with him because there's a cat that's prowling around, and she tells Templeton, like, well, Lurvy dropped a half a sandwich over there if you want to go and get it. And he's like, thanks. And he goes over, and then the cat tries to attack him, and he just, like, scurries back under his bed. And she's like, well, maybe the next time that I hold a meeting, he'll remember to show up. I love that bit where she's just messing with Templeton. And so the next day, they've got terrific written in the spider web again, and it's just like, the media sensation comes through again, and there's still, but Zuckerman is still planning on, slaughtering Wilbur and everything. And I'll be like, well, you get a good amount, depending on how big you got Wilbur, you get a good amount of bacon and ham out of him, and you could always sell it as some pig terrific ham or something like that. So we have all this other stuff that keeps happening. Fern's, coming less and less to the farm because her parents are worried that she's, going crazy from supposedly being only around the animals, and all this other stuff. And eventually, they end up having to come up with another word after terrific has kind of lost its zeal. Also, there's these funny bits where Wilbur keeps fainting anytime anytime Zuckerman mentions slaughtering him, which is fair. And he faints, and Charlotte has Templeton wake Wilbur up by, like, biting his tail to wake him up, which is just kind of funny. And so they're working on trying to figure out another word for, to describe Wilbur, and she sends Templeton to go and try to find some words, and he goes, and he comes back with, like, crunchy, and it's just like, no. And then he ends up like, well, I know where there's a soapbox with words on it, so he goes and he finds that. And he ends up, bringing back, like, something that says radiant on it. So, they're like, okay, well, is Wilbur radiant? And he, they have him, like, run around and jump and do flips and stuff like that in the pen. And Charlotte's trying to figure out, yeah, I think he's radiant. This will work. So that's what she does next, is spin radiant into her web. And so things are going somewhat according to plan, but not as much as they would like, but they're slowly whittling it down. And after the radiant thing, because of more people coming in and seeing Wilbur, what ends up happening is that Zuckerman then declares that he is definitely going to be taking this pig to the county fair in the summer. And so I believe that the way that this is designed to work is that, of course, Wilbur is a spring pig, and it's already been at least 6 weeks. It's not, several months since he was born. So that's already into this summer, or into that summer. So it might be that it's going to be looping around through winter into spring again and then summer, is what I'm thinking. Because it's like, well, this is way too long of a time for it to not be summer already. But I honestly don't know exactly how quickly pigs grow, so don't quote me on that. And what ends up happening is, so it's like they're all super happy about this, about Wilbur getting to go, and Zuckerman tells Lurvy to make a pig cake, take a crate that says Zuckerman's famous pig on it and everything like that. And everybody's like, yay, and happy and everything like that. And of course Fern's really happy about this and everything. And, so that's all going great. And, and then we have this nice little lullaby setup again where Charlotte is singing, Mother Earth and Father Time, which is a nice little lullaby setup about like the passage of time and everything like that. And eventually it's to the point where, like, Wilbur's asking Charlotte if she's going to accompany him to the fair. And she's like, well, I might, but it depends. And he's like, why would it depend on stuff? And she's like, well, you see, I'm going to have eggs soon, or I'm going to lay my eggs soon. And that's going to take a lot out of me. And when it's time for me to lay my eggs, it's time for me to lay my eggs. And he's like, oh, okay. And, it's like she does decide to go with him to the fair, and they kind of, with the help from the goose, they coerce Templeton into coming with them as well. Because she's like, well, I'm going to need Templeton to run errands while we're at the fair. And he's like, why would I go to the fair with you? And this is a very sassy rat. Templeton is a very sassy rat, and given who voices him, I understand why at the very least. And that'll be later when I mention that in the casting. But the goose ends up convincing Templeton to go by basically being like, well, a county fair is a veritable smorgasbord, orgasbord. So this is the way the goose talks, and we have this nice little sequence, musical sequence where, it's the goose is describing everything that gets left on the ground and in the trash and everything like that at the fair. And Templeton is just like, oh, like this is like his version of like Mecca or something like that for where he wants to go. So he's just like, oh my God, yes, I'll go, I'll help. So they have that, which is just so funny. And then we have a funny bit where it's I think it's like the day of the fair or the day before the fair or something like that, and like time has passed and like Wilbur has gotten so much bigger. And Mrs. Zuckerman is like, I'm going to bathe that pig in buttermilk because that's what my grandma used to do, and it always made them look wonderful. So, okay, she bathes Wilbur in buttermilk to get them all nice and clean, I guess. And yes, I'm aware, it's just like in Lincoln is where we have like the county fair and where we used to have the state fair before it moved. That was 14 years ago, and I'm still angry. Still annoyed about it when they moved the state fair out of Lincoln. Love the state fair. That was great. It was the same week as the first week of school, and I get to go there after school on certain days and run around and have fun and blah 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 and go see fun musical fun entertainment and everything. But so they're gonna so many other people are gonna be taking their animals to the fair and everything like that, and they want to do something to try to help Wilbur stand out as best as possible. And then they're like, okay, well, we got to get Wilbur into the pen. And Charlotte tells Wilbur, you can't go into the pen willingly, or else they'll think something's wrong with you. So that leads to Wilbur having to run around the pen and have Mr. Zuckerman and then Fern's father and brother get him into the crate, and then load it into the truck to head down to the fair. And when they get there and they're just like, we got Zuckerman's famous pig, and they're like, okay, livestock's that way. And then like everybody's like, ooh, Zuckerman's famous pig. So they're nice big entrance to the fair and everything with that. So lots of fun stuff with that. And then they get Wilbur to the fair, and they get him all set up in his pen that he's gonna be in for the showing for the animals, for the livestock, for the pigs. And most of the humans head off to go and just like explore the fairgrounds and everything like that, and Fern stays behind a little bit. And then Henry Fussy shows back up again, who is the very prim and proper kid, and he looks a lot different now. And she's like, oh my God, what happened? And because he looks normal now. And he's like, well, I went to go and spend the summer with my grandpa, and he stepped on my guitar, and we went fishing, and it was really fun, and I just feel so much more like a me, as opposed to like what my mom wanted me to be, type of a thing. So it's just like, okay. So him and Fern and Henry Fern and Henry end up having, like, they kind of go off on a date, and Wilbur is just like kind of worried about this because he's worried that Fern's forgetting about him. And Charlotte's like, she's not forgetting about you. She's noticing Henry Fussy with new eyes. And, and she's allowed to do that. She's growing up, and Wilbur's kind of sad about that. And so they end up finding this other pig who's also there, whose name is Uncle, who is this much, much bigger pig than Wilbur. And he's not rude, but he's not like as articulate as Wilbur. And Charlotte's like, okay, well, I got to do something to get you to make sure that this is going to work. So that night, she sends Templeton out to go and find a word that'll work for her to use for Wilbur. And then she's like, you find me the word, and then you can go out and you can gorge yourself. And it's like, the way that they keep coercing Templeton into helping them is by pointing out the fact that if Wilbur dies, you lose your food supply because you won't have the slop that Lurvy brings every day for you to be able to eat out of. So that's how they keep getting Templeton to work with them. And what ends up happening is he goes out and he comes back and he has the word humble. And Charlotte is like, humble. Humble has two meanings. It means not proud, and it also means near the ground. That's Wilbur all over. So she starts working on, sewing, weaving her web. And working in the word humble into it. So that's all set and ready for the morning. And then Templeton gets to go out and gorge himself on all of the leftover food that has been left on the ground and in the trash and everywhere else in the fairgrounds. And we just have him just going off and gorging himself on everything he can get his hands on. And he comes back the next morning and he is so fat and so, I guess the closest thing you're ever going to see to a drunk rat. That's not from the Great Mouse Detective from Disney. And he's just like, he gets back and he's just like so blissed out on all the food and everything like that. And, and that morning, when Wilbur woke up, he was looking at, he found Charlotte. And he's like, so how'd the night go? And she's like, it went wonderful. She got the humble all set up and everything, but she also laid her eggs. And I don't remember exactly how many eggs there were. It was 514 of them. And she's like, I've laid my eggs, this, in my egg sack, and this is my magnum opus, my great work, my final work that I will make. And he's like, oh, that'll be wonderful, and we'll take him back to the farm and everything like that. And she's like, I don't think I'll be going back to the farm, Wilbur. I've been languishing. And he's like, what does that mean? She's like, I'm slowing down. I'm dying, Wilbur. And that just makes Wilbur very, very sad because, like, Charlotte has been his best friend for this whole time and has been working so hard to try to help him and, try to save his life and everything. And, so he is very sad about this. And then that's when, she doesn't quite explain that part to him quite yet. But, what happens is that's whenever, the Zuckermans and, Fern and her family show up and everything. And they see the word humble spun into the web. And they're just like, yep, that's Wilbur. And, like, everybody keeps quoting, that's some pig. He's terrific. He's radiant. Now he's humble and everything. And Wilbur's, like, so happy and everything for that. And what ends up happening is Fern's brother notices that there is, that the other pig, Uncle, is the one that got first place. So they're all really worried about that. And then that's when the fair staff shows up, like a parade shows up, like the orchestra or whatever marching band shows up. And it's just like, Mr. Zuckerman, we are here to escort you and your some radiant, terrific, humble whatever pig to the main stage for your rewards and everything. And they're like, okay. So all the group is like following the marching band and everything like that through the fairgrounds to like the center place where they're handing out the awards and everything. And like I guess he's supposed to be like the head of the fair commission or whatever, honors, it's just like, because of all of the tourism and everything like that your your miraculous pig has brought to our county and our area and everything like that, we award you $25 and this engraved bronze medal. And then there is a barbershop quartet that is there and starts singing Zuckerman's famous pig, and it's just like, terrific and radiant and humble famous pig and blah, 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 blah. Like, they're serenading a pig. So, and Wilbur's, happy about this and everything, and everybody else is happy about this, and Zuckerman is like, he's gonna live, I thank you all this, and I not, like Wilbur is gonna be, live to a ripe old age and everything like that. So, Wilbur's safe. And then that's, they, take him back to the pen and everything like that. And he's talking to Charlotte and showing her the medal and everything. And that's where she reveals that she's going to die. And Wilbur is just so upset about this. But he's like, he's not going to let her children be abandoned. So he literally kicks Templeton out of the crate where he'd been sleeping and says, Templeton, you have to go up there and you have to get Charlotte's eggs and everything, and we have to take them back to the farm. And he's like, why do I have to do it? And he's like, fine. From now on, you get first dibs out of when Lurvy brings me slop every day. And he's like, fine. He climbs up, gets the egg sack, climbs back down, and goes back into the crate. And Charlotte, Wilbur's, trying to tell Charlotte, it's like, your eggs are safe, we're taking them back to the barn. And, Charlotte doesn't answer. And Wilbur is just very, very sad, and he's, crying when the rest of them show up, when, the rest of the family show up to, get him into the crate and take him back home. And eventually, they do get Wilbur home, and they have, the narrator is like, so Wilbur came home to his beloved manure pile in the barn cellar. Around his neck he wore a medal of honor. In his mouth he held a sack of spider's eggs. Wilbur no longer worried about being killed, for he knew that Mr. Zuckerman would keep him as long as he lived. And then we have this nice little sequence, where it's, showing the passage of time again, where Wilbur's, hidden Charlotte's little egg sack to keep it safe with all of the 514 baby, little spider eggs in it. And then, spring comes around and its new life is coming to the farm and everything. And, new life, other, new goslings and everything else are hatching. And then the spider eggs hatch. And, they all start filing out of the barn. And, they all, use their webs to fly away in the wind. Use their strength to help carry them and fly off into the wind, which is just a beautiful sight, but also just like slightly disturbing of like, and they can fly. Why? No. And, all of them head off. Well, 511 of them head off. And then Wilbur is just, because they're like, no, we have to go out and we're going to go, be on our own and everything. And Wilbur is just distraught by this because he's like, no, he's so sad now because it's just like Charlotte is gone and the babies aren't even there anymore. So he's, he's getting ready to try to like do a great escape and get out of the pig pen. To, try to head off and everything because he doesn't want to be there because there's too many memories in the farm. And that's when he hears three little voices, and he looks over and he sees, the goat points out, or not the goat, the sheep points out that there's still like three little spiders waiting in the barn, three little runts of the litter. And Wilbur goes over and he talks to them, and they're like, we're going to stay here. And he's like, and they're like, will you give us names? And he's like, yes. And one is like, he's like, why are you trembling, the woman? And she's like, I'm filled with joy. And he's like, okay, then you're Joy. And one of them is like, okay, well, Nellie is one of them. And then the other one is just like, what was my mother's middle initial? A, just like that, I'm Arania. And so it's just like they have all the little, they have those 3 little spiders that stay, and everybody in the barnyard is welcoming them and everything like that. So they have all of that nice bit, and like the last little bit is like, Wilbur never forgot Charlotte, although he loved her children and grandchildren dearly. None of the new spiders ever quite took her place in his heart. She was in a class by herself. It is not often that someone comes along who is a true friend and a good writer. Charlotte was both. So they have that whole bit there, and as I stated, I love this movie so much. There is an animated sequel that they made, and I think like the mid 2000s ish. That's like Wilbur's Great Adventure or something like that, where he befriends like a sheep that's been born with black fur and everything like that. And I enjoy that one as well, but I don't think they got anybody back for it. But going into the cast for this movie, we have Henry Gibson as Wilbur, who I believe was a comedian at the time, but also was a singer and everything. And the one on this list that I'm actually surprised that I never realized it, but it had been so long since I watched this movie. Charlotte is voiced by Debbie Reynolds. And I love Debbie Reynolds so much. I love her in Singing in the Rain. I love her in The Unsinkable Molly Brown. I love her in the Halloween Town movies. I love Debbie Reynolds, and I always will. And I was so sad when she passed. She's an amazing singer, an amazing actress, and she's the mother of Debbie Reynolds, of Carrie Fisher, who is of course Princess Leia, who we also have lost, unfortunately. So there's so much there, and she is just such an amazing singer and performer and everything like that, and I was so sad when she passed. And that might just be another reason why I love this character, why I love Charlotte so much, is like she's Debbie Reynolds, and I've always loved Debbie Reynolds. Let's see, then we have Paulin, who as Templeton, and people don't necessarily know a whole lot about Paulin necessarily from my generation, but I know him as he was one of the uncles on Bewitched that would cause a lot of problems. He was on Hollywood Squares a lot and different things like that. He was a character, and he was Templeton, and he was great as Templeton for making him very sassy. They have Agnes Moorehead as the Goose, she was a rather famous actress, but I don't remember exactly. Don Messick was Jeffrey, who is the little goose, along with a bunch of other animals. And then the narrator of the film is Rex Allen, who I believe was a country singer at the time. And those were like the main ones for, who played, the characters in the movie. I didn't really recognize the names of anyone who played any of the humans off the top of my head. But those were the main ones here. As I stated, I love this movie. I don't know exactly how frequently I'll be getting out these miscellaneous non-Disney animated movie reviews, but we'll see. So I'm not even going to worry about trying to keep track of all of that at the moment. I'll be doing them as time allots, when there's breaks in One Piece and I don't have another video to do. And I know we're going to be getting new My Heroes next month, and then I don't remember when we're supposed to be getting new Black Clover stuff, but hopefully it'll be soon. But that's what I have for this, so I thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you haven't watched Charlotte's Web for a while, go and watch it, because it is just kind of fun to watch. And I do like the live action one with Dakota Fanning as well. That one's also pretty good as well, although I don't remember how many songs are in that one. Bye.